This is pre-algebra lesson 1-. Multiplying and dividing integers. Now, when you were younger and you learned about multiplication, you learned that multiplication is simply repeated addition. For example, if I have 3 times -5, that means I have -5 plus -5 plus -5, which equals -15. 5 times -4 is -4 plus -4 plus -4 plus -4 plus -4. When you add those all together, you get -20. 2 times -8 is -8 plus -8, which is -16. And 4 times -10 is -10 plus -10 plus -10 plus -10, which is -40. A pattern emerges which shows us that all of the sums are negative. This suggests that the product of a negative number and a positive number is negative. Kind of makes sense. If I have a positive number and I multiply it by a negative number, because it's repeated addition and the signs are the same, it's going to stay negative. Now, you can use patterns to simplify the product of a negative number and a positive number as above, or the product of 2 negative numbers. Let's take a look at this. We're going to take a look at -2 times 5. And we're just going to go with a pattern. We're going to start with 2 times 5, which is 10, and then 1 times 5, which is 5, and then notice these are going down by 1. Okay, all these are doing is going down by 1. So 2 times 5 is 10, 1 times 5 is 5, 0 times 5 is 0, -1 times 5 is -5, and -2 times 5 is -10. What is happening on the right-hand side? They're going down by 5s. These are going down by 1, and these are going down by 5s. Okay. So the pattern here says that if I'm multiplying a negative number by a positive number, okay, it stays negative. Notice negative times a positive is negative. Negative times a positive is negative. We already know that positive times a positive is a positive. Now let's see what happens when we have a negative times a negative. Okay, we'll start off with a negative times a positive, okay, because we want to look at the pattern again. If I take 2 times -5, that gives me -10. Again, I'm going down by 1, aren't I? Subtracting 1, subtracting 1, subtracting 1, subtracting 1. Here, what happens is we add 5, we add 5, we add 5, and we add 5. So when we finally get down here, we have 2 times -5 is -10, 1 times -5 is -5, 0 times -5 is 0. -1 times -5 becomes +5 if we follow the same pattern. And -2 times -5 becomes +10 because if it follows the pattern, which it does, it has to change to positive. This leads us to the rules for multiplication and the rules for division, basically. The rules for multiplying integers, which can be summed up very simply. The product of 2 integers with the same sign is positive. Opposite signs, negative. A positive times a positive is a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. And a positive times a negative is a negative. Another way to remember it is if you have an even number of negative signs, okay, it will result in a positive product. If you have an odd number of negative signs, it will result in a negative product. Okay? So in other words, if I have 4 negative signs, it's going to be positive. But if I have 5 negative signs, my product will be negative. Let's take a look at some examples. We're going to simplify these. -4 times 8 times -2. I have 2 negative signs. That's an even number of negative signs, so I automatically know that my answer is going to be positive. I'm going to do that before I even start thinking about the multiplication part. I always do that first. Look at my problem, count my negative signs. Is my answer negative or positive? Write that down so I don't forget to do it. Okay, so now I can just do however I want. Okay, so I can do, this is -32 times -2, which is going to be +64, which is why I have 64. Okay. Another way I could have done it is -4 times -2, which is +8. 8 times 8 is still 64. Either way, it's still positive in both times, and it ends up being 64. So you put the plus 64, you just leave it as 64. Number 2 only has 1 negative sign, which means my answer is going to be negative. Okay. And I don't care how you want to do it. I'm going to do it this way. 6 times 5 is 30. 30 times -3, that's an easy multiplication. So this is -90. And you have it. Okay, multiplication order doesn't matter. Number 3, you look at it and say, oh, I have 2 negative signs, my answer is going to be positive. And then I look and see I have 0, and then anything times 0 is 0, and 0 is either positive or negative, so my answer is 0. We like 0, it's easy. Number 4, 6 times negative 2 times negative 5. I have 2 negative signs. That's an even number of negative signs, which means my answer is going to be positive. So now I just need to multiply. This is 10. 10 times 6 is 60. We look at number 5. Now number 5 is here, not because I don't think we can multiply by 1, but it's for you to look at this and say, gee, is my answer going to be positive or negative? All you have to do is count the number of negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 8 negative signs. So my answer here is going to be positive 1 because I have an even number of negative signs. Okay, 8 negative signs. Okay, which is even. Okay, which equals a positive answer. As simple as that. The rules for division, very similar to the rules for multiplying. The only thing is you're not normally dividing by 3 numbers, so you really only have to worry about 2 numbers. The quotient of 2 integers with the same sign is positive. The quotient of 2 integers with opposite signs is negative. And remember, division by 0 is undefined. I can't divide something by 0. I can't have 8 brownies and divide them equally among 0 people. I'm just going to have 8 brownies, and nobody to share them with. My life is sad because I have 8 friends, and therefore it's undefined. All right, here we go. Number 1, negative 32 divided by 8. Since there's only one negative sign, my answer is going to be negative. And 32 divided by 8 is 4, so the answer is negative 4. Number 2, negative 48 divided by negative 8. Same signs, so it's going to be positive. 6 times 8 is 48, so this is going to be 6. Number 3, negative 56 divided by negative 4. Again, same signs. Okay, if they're the same signs, it's going to be positive. If they're opposite signs, it's going to be negative, so it's going to be positive. 56 divided by 4, in case you didn't know that, you can just over here. 4 goes into 5, 1, 9. So it's 14. Just in case you didn't know. Number 4, find the average of 4, negative 3, negative 5, 2, negative 8. Well, average is adding them up and dividing them by the number of numbers. So the first thing I have to do is add them all up. So this is what I'm going to do. 4 plus 2, and add that to negative 3 plus negative 5 plus negative 8. I'm going to combine all my positive numbers together and all my negative numbers together. 4 plus 2 is 6, plus negative 8 plus negative 8 is negative 16. So this equals negative 10, and how many numbers do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So the average here is negative 5. Oops. I messed up. I said I divided by 5, and then the answer was 2, and I wrote divided by 2, the answer is 5. I should be negative 2 because it's a negative, because one negative something. So negative 10 divided by 5, the average of those numbers is negative 2. Multiplying and dividing integers is much simpler than addition and subtraction because there's really only one set of rules that applies to both. Just count your negative signs. If you have an even number of negative signs, it's positive. If you have an odd number of negative signs, it's negative, and you're done.